Hi everyone, this is Tony Russell. I am the proud publisher of Neighbors of Hespeler Village, and I am here with another Hespeler's Home video, and I'm here at FoodZen with Destiny Moser, the proud owner of this place, this venture. You're not a restaurant. Actually, that's well, welcome to the show today, Destiny. Why don't you tell me about FoodZen and what you guys do and don't do?
Yeah, so FoodZen is not a restaurant.
Okay.
So that's the first thing.
Okay. Yeah.
We are a meal delivery service. So we make meals for families, busy professionals, seniors. And our goal really is to cut out as much processed food from your diet as possible. So we do meals for families, but we also do kids' lunches. But if you do have a diet, maybe you have diabetes or kidney disease or something that needs something very custom, then we also do in-home personal chef services.
Yeah. Now, do you guys ever add additives to your stuff? You know, people are like, I need that growth hormone boost, or no?
No, for
Okay.
us, we really focus on balanced diet. So oftentimes if you are on a diet, I always say to our clients, the first thing you should do is try and cut out as much processed food as possible. Sadly, so much of our foods are filled with sugars and salts and preservatives that our bodies just can't break down. And so even though you are getting a ready-to-go meal that all you have to do is throw it in the microwave or the oven, we are cutting out those really bad kind of foods, ingredients that you don't want.
Okay. Now, Destiny and I have had a chance to chat in the past, so I'll try not to, act super naive and dumb or whatever. So something that I got whispers of before was that your background is actually in tech, which is like the exact opposite of nature and, natural and, organic things. Tech is like, let's build something and let's do something, and computers and ones and zeros. What the heck happened?
So food has always been my love language. I grew up with grandparents who lived on farms. My parents very much had that farm to table upbringing. They were the first generation to kind of leave farm life and move to the big city of Kitchener. And I just always had that idea of you eat what you grow, you eat what you raise. If you don't have something, you take a pig to market. So food became my love language, my way of expressing myself. However, I didn't like the idea of chef hours. And so I went into technology. I actually have dyslexia. Scholarly school stuff wasn't really my strong suit. Luckily, I was born during the generation where tech was just becoming big. Emails were becoming big. So I was able to get in there. I'm a very visual learner, hands-on learner, and I was able to work my way through the tech world, managing mergers and acquisitions for quite a large tech firm in our area. COVID hit and I had to step back from my job a bit. Luckily, I worked for a company at the time who was like, we understand you're a parent, you've got to do homeschooling with your kids. Homeschooling actually ended up being easier than I thought it would be.
Oh, okay.
So then I started to get bored myself and I would just Google cooking classes. I've always loved to learn, and I've cooked with lots of chefs in our area. And I came across a school at the time called Liaison College. It's now called Top Tukes. And they were offering like a 16-week culinary program. Okay. And I was like, how cool would that be? While I was there, I learned about personal chefing, and right away I was like, this is what my family needs. My husband's anaphylactic to dairy, so processed foods, like the boxed meal programs, pop it in the oven foods, he can't eat any of them.
Oh, wow.
And so I was like, this is what I need. At the time, I couldn't find personal chefs in the area, so I went home and I said to my husband, like, I know I'm 40, but I feel like this is the perfect time for me to really like follow that food dream. And so he was completely on board with me quitting my job. And I started off as a personal chef business. It quickly grew, and people then wanted us to do meal deliveries. And then we moved into our school program, and now we're doing cooking classes. I teach in all the schools. So it's really blown up over the last 5 years.
Okay. So tell me a bit more about the school programs, because I that's new information to me.
Yeah, so we started cooking for families, and we
Mhm.
also had meal deliveries that we were sending to families. And they were like, "This is so great. Thank you for helping with supper." But what another area I'm really struggling with is that morning rush. How can I get meals into my kids' lunch boxes that
Yeah.
one, they're going to eat, two, that I know is the right nutrients? So many of the kids' lunches you're getting through other programs or even the grocery store are just heavily processed. And
Mhm.
so we're still giving you mac and cheese, but what we're doing is we're roasting like a butternut squash or a pumpkin, and we puree that into the cheese sauce. So we have a lot of meals where it's hidden vegetables as well
Ooh.
as seen vegetables.
Hopefully the
And
kids
then
don't hear that.
exactly. Our meatballs like are insane because we don't use eggs or flour or dairy as a binding
Okay.
or breadcrumbs or anything. What we do is we puree a bunch of vegetables, turn that into a paste, and then that becomes the binding for the meat.
Oh,
And
wow.
kids just love them. And so now all of a sudden, parents are finding that their kids are feeling full faster, staying full longer.
Mm.
They are not, bouncing off the walls and coming home starving. I've even found with my own kids that they aren't snacking as much, which
Interesting.
is good too, so that you know that they're feeling nourished.
Wow. Okay, that's really cool. Now, something that you're kind of renowned for locally is that you do a lot of indigenous cooking and all that. And from my knowledge from previous conversations with you, your mother was a '60s scoop survivor. And what's interesting was. My mother-in-law, who unfortunately passed away, how old am I? Or how about, 14 years ago when my wife and I got married. It was really sad. But I remember her saying, remembering that when she was a kid, she was like, oh, I remember like looking in the local, newspaper or magazine, and there was advertisements for, adopt an Indian, which is really, like sitting here today, I'm just like, oh, I feel bad as a person who sells magazine advertising that that's what it was used for back then. So, yeah, tell me about that story and that chapter of your life.
Yeah, so my mom, like you said, is part of the 60 scoop. What that means, if you don't know, is that she was taken from her community forcibly when she was 4 years old, put into foster care, which was predominantly white Christian homes, where she went through some of the most unimaginable pain, torture, and abuse for about 2 years. She then was adopted by a farming family here in the region, the Stemlers, which a lot of people
Oh, yeah,
know. They're kind
Stemlers
of
is a familiar name.
very founding family
Yeah.
members of the community. So they adopted her when she was 6, and she became the second oldest of 6 kids.
Okay.
So they never hid from us that we were Indigenous. We always knew. We just didn't know what that meant. And because our family was so big, my mom had about 110 cousins.
Oh.
There was always a family get together. We grew up with traditions. We grew up with celebrations. And so we didn't really know we were missing anything. So about 10 years ago, my brother was going through some mental health issues himself. He wasn't finding a lot from just traditional therapies, things like that. Somebody said, hey, maybe you should try the Indigenous side of things. He said, okay. He ended up going to a traditional Indigenous circle, and he said it was the first time in his life that he felt a sense of belonging, something we weren't necessarily looking for,
Mhm.
but we've also never been around that many Indigenous people. So then when I went, of course, I was excited about the food. And when it came time for lunch, it ended up being like the sandwich trays and the veggie trays and that kind of thing, things you would get at a traditional grocery store.
Yeah.
And I said, where's all the Indigenous food? And unfortunately, still today, most Indigenous food is considered exotic, illegal, specialty, and poisonous. And these are laws the government put in place to force Indigenous people onto the reserve to starve them out. And
Oh,
Until the late 1990s, there wasn't even allowed to have a grocery store on the reserve. And so Indigenous people ended up having to follow a very high processed diet, which is why at FoodZen, although we are Indigenous owned, we cook international foods. We still strive to follow Indigenous philosophies, and that's cooking hyperlocal, ultra seasonal, trying to cook everything from scratch and cut out as much of the process and the preserves foods as possible,
okay.
or the bad preserved foods, because
But
there's good preservatives.
there's good preservatives. Yeah, like ice, or I don't know. No, that's not a preservative. Obviously, I'm not the food guy. So that was interesting. You were talking about some of the traditional foods are like illegal or
Exotic.
considered poisonous. Like, what are some examples?
Yeah, so most of you, if you went for a walk, you're probably going to pass a deer. That is a native animal to Canada. A deer
Sure.
is something that Indigenous people would have used. That would have been a great meat source for them.
Sure.
There wasn't cows running around.
No.
Cows are exotic to Canada, but
No.
they're labeled as domestic,
No.
right? So they decided that they wanted cows to be domestic, and the food regulation basically says if it's on a cow, a pig, a poultry, or a lamb, it's exotic meat. And so right away, Indigenous food was considered exotic. Most of you probably go for a walk, and I don't know about you, but you can't go 15 minutes without seeing a sumac bush. Sumac is also native to Canada, but it's also native to other parts of the world like the Mediterranean and South Africa. Okay. So when you go to the grocery store, you'll find sumac, but it's not Canadian sumac. And so there's just things like that where we've really gone far in the wrong direction. We're probably only eating about 5 to 10% of all the food that's edible in Canada that's native to Canada.
Oh, okay. So like the bananas that are not Indigenous to Ontario potentially we're choosing that over.
Exactly. And even if we do have to buy like pineapples and bananas, sure, we try our best to make sure that we're not buying them from, say, Hawaii, because they're actually not Indigenous to there either, and it is ruining their environment. So we're looking, where in the world are they Indigenous to? Oh, South America. And we're trying our best to make sure that we're not just honoring the land here in our own region, but if we do need to get things that aren't native to Canada, that we're also honoring the land that they're grown in.
Very, very, very interesting. Thanks. Okay, so obviously with it being, Hespeler is home, the name of this video, tell me about Hespeler and how have you found it ever since you moved to Queen Street, parking aside or whatever?
So yeah, my uncle lives up the street. And so nice. I have gone back and forth on this street. I don't even know how many times. He had a pool and I didn't growing up. So we definitely did a lot of weekends at his house with the pool.
So and that's decades then.
Yeah, there used to be a KFC down the road, and we'd stop there, grab the bucket, and then go swimming. So I do know this area really well, and I love how it has that small town feel to it. One of my life dreams would be that the entire city of like Kitchener-Waterloo, Cambridge would just be these small little towns where you could walk to and we would rely less on cars, as an example. Therefore, we wouldn't have to worry so much about the parking. But I like that it has that small town feel. Although I grew up in Kitchener, my family, most of them, my extended family still was in, small towns like Baden, New Hamburg, New Dundee. I did spend a lot of time there, and I just love the feeling and the atmosphere, and that's really what Hespeler brings to me.
Okay, perfect. Okay, and then this is the final question, so you can take it whichever way you want, Destiny. If you had a message for those in Hespeler about FoodZen and or about stuff that you've learned in your life, what would it be? And feel free to answer both questions or whatever.
Yeah, so basically, if you're struggling to get meals on the table at night, we're averaging saving families about 10 hours per week, not having to do groceries, cooking. Families are telling us that they're reducing their waste. We know most people are wasting about 50% of their food, thinking they're going to cook that whole chicken or make that salad. So just stop worrying about that. You'll think that we're expensive, but essentially if you're eating out 3 times a week, we're cheaper than getting a McDonald's Big Mac,
Oh,
right?
wow.
But with our food, you can trust that you're not going to feel hungry in an hour.
Yeah.
So we're here, pop in. We're usually cooking on Tuesdays. We deliver, but you can also pick up on Wednesdays between 2 and 5. We have cooking classes the first Thursday of every month. So if you're like, I really want to learn to cook better, I want to learn to cook healthier, we really focus on meal prep and helping people how to shop, how to meal prep, how to get things in your fridge, freezer for the slow cooker, instant pot, sheet pan meals, that kind of thing. We're doing whatever we can to try and cut it processed food from your diet. It's really the way we need to start moving. So much of these box meals are just not working. Diabetes is on the rise, kidney disease is on the rise. So we want you to come in, say hi, ask questions. You can go to our website, Facebook, Instagram, all at foodzen.ca, so that you can see what we have. We don't hide pricing or anything like that. It's all online. If you have questions, you can walk in, talk to us, go online, and use the promo code newbie10, and you will save 10% on your subscription week by week.
So NEWBIE 10.
Yes.
Okay, like
exactly.
10.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Don't spell out TEN or else it won't work. Probably not.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. And then, are there any other messages, from Destiny and Moser to the Smiths at all, or no?
No, I think we're good. Just come in, say hi. I'm always happy to chat food if you have any health issues and you're just kind of trying to figure out what's the best avenue for me, for my family, for my health. I'm always happy to work with families and people.
And people, yes.
Not
families
just
and people.
Yes.
Okay. But not families that are not people. So dogs are not your, okay.
Yeah,
no,
we don't specialize in pet food, sorry.
No. But you could potentially. That might be 2028 or whatever. So. Okay, well, Destiny, thank you very much for your time, and all the best. And for all of you who are watching, thanks again for watching another episode. And definitely check out Destiny and FoodZen here on Queen Street. And if there's another business that you'd like me to meet and interview, so that way you can find out a little bit more about the place, shoot me a text or send me an email, and we can take it from there. All right, thank you. Bye.